can, I mean, it doesn't hurt to have, your confirmation with a vote. But if your advice is just providing instruction to me to just process this administratively, I think I can proceed. Amy, do you recall if Mama Natalia had a motion?
I think we did.
Yeah.
Motions are always a good idea.
Yeah. So if somebody would like to.
Move to approve.
We have a second.
I'll second.
Okay, yeah.
So you guys, wait, approving is what?
Move forward.
That he moves forward, you have to approve, like you're approving that he moves forward as administrative, is that what the motion is? Okay, just making sure, because that wasn't.
So Tim Young moved it and Mark Blackman seconded it. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? So moved. On to town of Woodstock, the land transfer to Valley Side Farm. This is new to me. I fucking thought stand up today, figure out what we have to do, and I guess this is something that just started a couple of years ago. Luke, would you like to fill us in on some of this, Chandler? And what just what we're doing?
Yeah, years ago, the town passed an ordinance to change the way that they convey town owned parcels. And when this all came to light, we pulled out the ordinance, and the first step was to get conservation commission, which happened Monday night. Then I had to come to this board and then be on from you folks, and then it goes to what we're looking to do is the town of Woodstock owns a 27-acre landlocked piece over adjacent to Valside Farm. And about a month ago, Lucas came to me and asked if we could possibly do a long-term lease on that piece of land so that he could increase his footprint. So when I brought the ordinance to his attention, we started talking about possibly him buying land rather than doing a lease. A few days later, he came to my office and made an offer to trade two parcels. The piece that the town owns, it's landlocked, we can't do anything with it, we can't get to it. We gotta pass two streams to get to it. It's not on the tax rolls, it's pretty much useless. The offer was swap that piece for an 18.2 acre parcel that is directly adjacent to the Woodstock Elementary School. It's that hillside that rolls down to the east of the school. It's the piece indicated in the red zone, but it maps, that's the GIS map. GIS map is if you look at to the right hand side, you see two different shades of green. The lower piece, which is got 220 feet of frontage on Rosewood Park Road, is part of the piece that we're talking about. So the town would gain, even though some of the minutes from the previous meeting said that there wasn't a front, correct. 220 feet of frontage, the driveway would be it's already installed. So if we did a direct swap, we help the farmer increase his footprint. He could clear it and get it ready for crops. When he does go to harvest the crops, he doesn't have to go out of town infrastructure. All of it, big trucks, big equipment, it all stays on the farm. Also helping with the fuel costs and over the road costs. So, and then on the other side of the line, Woodstock ends up with a piece that's going to be contiguous to the elementary school. At this point, there's absolutely no plans to do anything at all. But any time that we can gain a piece that's directly tied to a municipal piece, it's going to. And two other things would happen. The 27-acre piece would now come onto the tax rolls. It's not currently. And we would have use of this piece if we ever decided to move forwards. And until that point, the Valley Side Farm would like to lease this property and still continue to farm as it is. So it's, I can't find a single negative part to this whole thing, it's just a all the way around. And yes, we've been saying it's too good to be true. It's really seems like it's just a him all of the farmer, dating them, go to the school, would be recreation. Maybe just might stay just like this. But he'd be leasing the use of it. So we're not losing revenue there, we're gaining revenue on the other piece. And everybody wins.
Okay, thank you. Do you have anything to add to that, Lucas?
I think you said it all.
Okay. Just, the map that we have, we can't see where that lot that you said, I couldn't see where that other piece was that, is up next to the current property now. And is it on that big map? I didn't know if we could put it up on the screen.
Isn't it the last photo or?
The photo of what, this is the land that the people don't, the young don't currently, and I want to see where the, just out of curiosity, where the town property was up in. Gulfport Road. I know there's is that on that big map?
It's on this one.
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah, okay, now, okay, that's it. Okay, I was just,
And you see it sits fairly far back from the road.
oh, yeah, no,
We took it and moved taxes many years.
Roseland Park Road. I see. So do we need to make a, we need to make a motion and approve this?
After you just stay with your own board with the project moving forward.
Does anybody else have any input?
The best control of news, you make a report to the select. They make a motion about what
Okay,
your conclusion is.
so we need a motion about conclusion to the selectmen, because it's eight
Eight of
24 review. So we need a motion for this to go to the,
One quick question. For you.
yeah, sure.
What's
If there's anybody else.
What's the total acreage on the piece that's next to the school? 'Cause the rectangle's 18, but then you said, is there a piece that between that and Roseland Park Road or not?
And Chandler and I were looking at,
It's funny, if you look at the map, the piece that's outlined in red, the big rectangle is according to GIS the piece. If you do the acreage on that, it's 13.78, I believe. If you add the 220-foot pigtail that goes down to the road, that's when it adds up to 18.2. So the map is correct in that.
our
It's
GIS.
incorrect, it's incorrect as far as having the boundary line through the center. of it.
It includes one of these.
Is there a survey on record of this property with that?
Sorry,
Is there a survey on record of that with the pigtail on it, other than the GIS map? I mean, it must be recorded somewhere, right?
yes.
Okay.
But we've got a deed for the property and
Okay.
so to explain to the property, which includes that pigtail.
Anybody else? Joe?
Yeah, so again, the frontage onto Roseland Park Road, that remaining rectangle there, that's about 2.5, 3 acres.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit more.
A little bit more.
So if they wanted to put a house lot there eventually, they probably could.
It's not split that way. It's all one piece on a deed.
But if the deal goes through, it'll be 2 separate lots.
No,
No, it's one.
no, it's one lot. Even though the GIS map is incorrect, the deed is correct. And the deed includes that whole piece.
And this is the town.
Okay,
is what-
I'm
the town is
Wait,
gonna
can
get
you
that
come
piece
up with-
there.
Outline which, what's included.
I'm confused.
The elementary school is what you're seeing on the left side of the screen.
Yeah.
And so the town will get the property going from the elementary school all the way down. to the-
Right, the GIS is this rectangle here. But it says 18.2 on the map. But if you do the calculations, this is just under 14. This, when you add this piece, then it becomes the 18.2.
Okay, so
really this.
He wants to trade that entire piece then, including the frontage on
The
road,
town would end up with this whole thing, including the frontage on the road. with
including the
driveway.
front. Okay,
And in return, the Youngs would receive the 27 acres that's landlocked. Town owned land out.
all right. Okay,
And that's what this Schedule A is about?
Yes,
So this Schedule A from the deed is saying that it has the 220 feet of frontage along the road. So that's where it's recorded. And as far as I know, this is not talking about dividing the land. It's just
Right.
one property being swapped for another property, with no changes in boundary.
okay, then another question. The other land that you want to acquire that belongs to the town now, that's how many acres?
27
27? And that's landlocked?
completely.
Does the farmer have access to it, or can he have access?
It's contiguous to his piece now.
All right, and it looks like it's mostly woods,
Yes, pine.
pine, okay. So I assume the plan is to clear it and then use it for crops? There's no wetlands on it?
There is a small
Seasonal water.
seasonal runoff.
On the far western fringe. Water course kind of straddles the property line in a couple spots.
And it's, the topography is such that it's easy to farm?
Yeah, it's a pretty large plateau throughout the middle section. About
It's a
23.
top of a drumlin?
Hmm.
It's the top of a drumlin, I think, right, if it's Dug Hill Road? Okay, and then you want, some kind of an access to continue to farm this land behind the elementary school. Is that correct?
He could use the driveway that's existing. He can
Not-
use the
not a new
driveway that's
access.
existing, actually, Valley Side put the driveway in when they purchased it. So they'd still farm it the same way they do now, they come up the driveway.
Right, right.
From Rosen.
And so there would be some kind of an agreement with the town, some kind of a lease with the town to continue to farm it, right?
Right, but the town would always have the option to terminate that agreement. if the town
Right, that
decided
was
to
my
use
other
it for
point
recreation.
was to be careful not to make it a permanent lease where the farmer would have it forever.
Yes and no. Yes, Valley Side would have the right to farm. Nobody else
Right.
would, Valley Side would. But if the town decided to use part of it or all of it, at that point, the agreement's on. And that'll all be.
Okay.
There's also three-phase power. And there's access, there's a driveway from the corner of the parking lot of the elementary school that goes into the.
Yeah, I was just trying to make sure that we didn't lock it into agriculture forever.
Right.
And not be able to be used for something else.
That was all part of the agreement.
Any other questions? Do I have a motion to, approve the 824 review and send it to the selectmen? Is that the correct phrasing of that?
I'm trying to bring up the information for you.
Yeah. Need to approve it to send it back to the selectmen or to go to town? What are we doing? We have to approve.
Back to the conveyance of town land. And then we're going to move it.
I'll make a motion to approve. A second.
This is the statute on 8-24.
just for the record, the Board of Selectmen started this whole process, including selectmen agreed that it was a project that we felt was a good benefit of the town. And it was unanimous vote to bring it to the next.
That you made that, but let's just state the motion. What, do we have an actual motion to approve the?
So the motion will be to approve. The. Is it, I guess, transfer. Or swapping of two properties. One's privately owned farmland and the other, town owned land. These two properties.
Do we have the map?
We
left?
approve it, or we approve to send it to the selectmen? We're approving it to send it to the selectmen. Map one.
We have to indicate the
And
map.
identify what the properties are in your motion.
Where the,
It's on the new card letter.
oh, for the hearing, we felt that. Okay. Yeah. For the lot, for many. That would be the lot on 5132-29. 15 on Dougville Road. The Valley Side Farm. And parcel 5779/52/05 that is on.
On Rosenthal.
Golden Park Road. And this is incorrect, it actually does have frontage. So can we add that, you want to add that to the,
Yes, yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, we can do that.
you all set with that? Are we clear with that, Amy?
Yeah.
Okay. Can we have, all in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? And abstains? Okay. Good luck.
Very much.
Now, we're on to election of commission officers. This is a new one, we need chair, a secretary, and a vice chair. Do we have any nominations?
Nominate David Mark, Chairman. Second.
Any other? Can we do this, nominate all three and then vote on all three of them at once, so we don't have to go through it? We have a nomination for vice chair.
One black one.
Second. Okay. Okay, and do we have a nomination for secretary? Okay. That's good. Any other nominations for any positions?
Secretary Tim.
I'll sign it.
Thank you.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay,
Congratulations.
congratulations, Mark.
No more.
Thanks. Do we go on a POCD update?
Yes.
That's pretty good.
So this should have been emailed out to you with the links to the state plan of conservation and development. And I can email out the presentation, so if the link from the image doesn't work, I have the link on the side. If that one should work. So this is what the website will look like when you go to it, and I can stop sharing this document and go to that website to show you what you'd be looking at. You're invited to comment. From the
Oh, Joseph,
state.
Joseph had a letter just during the meeting. Can you hear us, Joseph?
So I have a little bit about the state PZC and the rest of my presentation, but this is the link where you can go and read about it. And the commission is invited to make comments to the state. And so you just click on each one of these. The funny thing about their website is your back button doesn't work. But when you click on one of those, like the introduction, this little thing on the side with the little square. Oh, you're not seeing that. Lower, please.
No.
Again, the back button doesn't work. So this is when you go to the link that's on the presentation, this is what you go to. If you click on any one of these blue boxes, you'll go to this. And you can scroll down to read about it. You can't go and the back button doesn't work, but when you go to the little squares on the side of the screen. That's not what we're looking at. There is a website and there'll be little squares in the corner. And you can click on it and you can read all about the plan. And I'm not sure why that's not showing what's on my screen.
Yeah, this is on the P and Z part of the town website. Where, what is the,
This is the state plan of conservation and development on the state website. And I sent out what that first image was, that looked like a white screen with the links on it. And so I had emailed it to everyone because the
So
links
it's in my
work in the
email.
paper.
Off my,
which you said?
yeah.
Yeah.
So when you go to this is the website with those little squares on the side. See up there where you have the blue circle and then you saw squares for a moment. It's been flowed tonight. So imagine there's a website and you can see the map. And I'll just go back to my presentation because I have slides of what the map looks like. This is what the document in your email looks like. The link should work from that email. But I will be sending out the presentation and the links are in the presentation as well. looks now. This is what the map looks like. So we'll get there in a second, but the previous slides I wanted to go over. You can click on each one of these blue squares and you'll go into different parts of the website. And the one on the right where it says draft plan, that's where you'll be able to see the actual PDF document that you can read. And so I summarized their vision. This is what's in the document. And for each one of the vision, they have a whole bunch of text that goes with it. So this is different from the previous state P O C D. But you're welcome to read it, and then if you wanted to, we could follow up again at the next meeting in December, and if you wanted to make any comments, I would write them up for you and send them into the state. You're also welcome as an individual to send in your own comments. These are their policies, and if, when you go into the document, of course, there'll be a lot more text along with each one of the policies. I'll let you have a chance to read them for a moment. Go to the back for a moment. Right from here, if you go to the locational guide map, that's the square here. You'll go to that interactive map that I was talking about. So when you get to this slide, if it's not working, you have to click on the little box here, and then you'll hit OK, and then it'll work. This is the map for Woodstock when you have all the layers showing. And when you go into the website, you can go around and, you know, click on different buttons and you'll see where you can check out the different layers and see what they show. And if it was working, I could demonstrate it for you this evening, but it doesn't seem to be working for me. I wanted to see what they were showing for Woodstock for the Connecticut activity centers. They've identified these 3 yellow areas as the rural centers and corridor activity zones. I'm not sure that that's really the most active parts of town, so I'd have to spend some more time going through the plan to see what how they describe these rural centers and border activity zones. I think South Woodstock should count as something. So if you're gonna make a comment, that might be something you could point out. So if you don't, do you have any other comments about the state plan before we move on?
Do you think those might be smaller lot sizes that?
I'm not sure, because I don't think
The
it
villages.
the,
It's West Woodstock, East Woodstock, and Hill Villages.
it might be about housing, but I would think when it says, activity zones, I would think it would include businesses.
Sure.
And I don't think that's where the bulk of your businesses are.
Woodstock. Yeah, you can see the lakes up there. That's the west.
Read about it.
Did you have any other comments? I think while you're, you can go back and forth on the slides, and then you go back and. You might have to do them.
If I can do this without, like use, in touch screen, can I?
Push the wrong button.
No, I know, be very careful. Okay. That it is actually showing us type of business in Woodstock. Pretty accurate description of what we have in town. Tell you where the different kind of businesses are. Concentration in the southeast corner, but kind of spread all over town. Southeast out there. Okay, this is the site plan review, the deal is talking about maybe adding as a layer, for in our zoning. Questions of how to get there. I don't think I broke it.
This is beyond this is not the state POCD. This is for Woodstock.
Yeah, I knew that.
Okay,
We figured that out.
good. So we talked about some of these things before, and so if you wanted to discuss them any further, this is how I think you would get there. If you wanted to consider those and wanted to make any recommendations, that's what would be included in the POCD. So at the point of the POCD, you wouldn't have to come up with all those details. You don't write the regulations or the standards as part of the POCD, but you make recommendations. And when you do the zone change, if you decide to, or if you do the text amendment, during that process, you have to show that you're consistent with your plan. That's why if your plan is too vague, how do you know that you're consistent with it? You have to put enough guidance in your plan so that when you do it, know that you're consistent with it. So for instance, if you wanted to do a new zone, you should at least circle a part of town where you would do the new zone, what kind of zone it might be, and then separate from the POCD, like later on, if you were gonna actually go ahead and do it, that's when you would set actual boundaries. That would have to be better than a circle. It would have to show you clearly which properties were in or what was the size or location of the zone.
For a question, but if we did that in the POCD, would that limit us to that area?
That's what I'm saying, in the POCD, you would make like a circle, you wouldn't have
But
to,
I mean, but even if we make that circle and we want to do something outside of the circle, would we be allowed to do it because it's outside of what we did in the POCD, or can we just do it wherever we want?
I think in your recommendation, you could talk about how it might go here, but through further discussion, you know, if you wanted to do that zone in a different place, or, you know, that's what you would go through during your public hearing in your planning phases of your zoning change itself.
Okay, I understand. I just don't know how specific we have to get in the POCD. If we're just giving ourselves guidelines, do we want to limit it to an area or suggest an area, but I don't want to put it something. POCD isn't hard law. We can do whatever we want. Right? I mean, it's not, even if we decide we write
You have to
this,
show that you're consistent with it. If you're not consistent with it, then I don't think you're in compliance with the requirement. You do a phone change or a text amendment.
well, then we won't, then I would be the opinion that we keep the P O C D intentionally a little vague so that we don't pigeonhole ourselves in the future to not be able to do something because we're done in violation of our P O C D.
I would think a little bit of vagueness is okay, but sometimes I hear, consider revising the regulations, but then nothing ever happens. That's not actually a lot of guidance, but if you don't wanna nail it down to a certain area, like, for instance, I'm not telling you what to do, but if you wanted to do mixed use zone, you could say, consider a mixed use zone and, but it would be a little bit more than that, like, what types of uses, or are you considering South Woodstock without identifying the limits of what the zone might be, as opposed to mixed use zone all over town? Cause you could just do community district as mixed use if you wanna do.
Yes, I understand. I agree with you. We need to put some guidelines in there, but I just don't want to be too specific so that we don't put ourselves in a spot where we're trapped by it in the future.
Yeah, would it be possible that Attorney Roberts for some guidance on language there,
Sure.
Yeah,
that way? Yeah, 'cause I agree with you. You know, we don't want to just get pigeonholed in that.
and I understand we want to give ourselves good guidelines to move forward, but we also don't, and we have a history of not particularly doing any of this.
But if you're stating the goals, I mean.
If we state our goals, that's fine.
If you state the goals and then you write, consider. And then give specific things you might consider.
Yeah.
And that doesn't lock you in at all. And that's reasonably specific.
Yes, but that's, I mean, I think like stating areas or just saying we might consider this area rather than saying this area,
Right.
so that we not locked into an area. I mean, it's 10
But
years.
I don't think you have to choose the location now. I just think it should be more guidance than just consider zoning. Cause I've seen a lot of vague recommendations over the years and then nothing happens. And then when you're outside of the P O C D and you're in the process where you might make changes, there's not a lot of guidance, and you go back to the document, but it doesn't really have a lot there, so you go back to square one and then you're not consistent because how could you do a lot when there wasn't in the plan to direct you? So
Okay.
you don't, I'm not saying you have to pick it today or during this process, but,
Well,
and if you didn't want to pick a place yet, but say if you were interested in mixed use as an example, you could say, consider a mixed use zone for the purposes of whatever, like, put something in there, a little more detailed and,
yes, yes, I agree with you. I just don't, I think we have to be aware of pigeonhole. And I, there's middle ground. I mean, we don't want to be vague, because we'll give direction without being too specific.
Is change in like the word you use, like instead of consider, identify property, and that kind of, I mean, it's kind of, the word identify means you're gonna put a little more work into just consideration, but I think it's almost.
Yeah.
I think what Dwight said about reaching out to Rich Roberts.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
One thing about working with the attorney, we do want to be a frame as much as we can. So we don't start that attorney clock. Because they could just write. I mean, we don't really want them to write the whole thing. That would
Yeah.
defeat the purpose of what we're
So
doing.
we have to have. we
yeah,
have to have
what specifically do you want me to ask them? Or am I not the one asking, someone else asking?
I don't care who asked. I just wonder, we're concerned about the structure of the P O C D and how it affects our future plans. If something changes, can we work outside of the P O C D, or do we have to stay within those guidelines? I think that's the question we're asking. Right?
It's about the issue of vagary.
Yeah,
Well, as long as you've clearly identified your goals, it would seem, if you write it in such a way that you say, in order to achieve these goals, we will consider certain zoning changes, such as mixed use in these particular areas, et cetera, et cetera. We've identified things like housing and increased business
Yeah.
as two major themes. of this. And it would seem for each area in the town, you could write it in such a way that it would leave it open, but also be reasonably specific to achieve those goals.
Okay. Is that clear to you?
I mean, does that seem?
We've also, over the last couple of years, talked about home occupations. So I think the current regulations are pretty vague about what kinds of uses. It's more about the number of employees, the size of the space that you're devoting to the business, number of parking spaces, but I've heard a lot of concern perhaps over a certain ice cream business that when it was granted the permit, it met the requirements. So as the zoning officer, I had to approve it. And when you're the zoning officer and something comes in, you can't make a judgment call based on, they don't have a good business plan, or I don't think it's in a good location. Because that's not how your zoning is written. If you had a zone that this kind of business had to be in this zone, then you would have the clear decision to make in whether it's in compliance or not. But right now, your standards are more about, it says nothing about the use, it's more about the intensity. So you might consider changing the home occupation regulations to specify if there's something that cannot be approved as home occupation, such as a food service, or like maybe you'd allow a caterer, but not food service to direct sale, like a coffee shop or an ice cream business where customers go there in person to purchase the food, or a restaurant or an auto body, because there was a small auto body shop that because they had a very small one stall garage, one person employee, and they showed me the 4 parking spaces. They were in compliance, so I had to approve it. He did come back for a special permit when he wanted to expand, and that was the correct process, but I'm not sure that an auto body shop is really should be a home occupation, just like I'm not sure a food service should be a home occupation. So you could reconsider, there's many different ways you could reconsider the home occupations. But if there was something that's more intense, maybe that would be the site plan review. Or if it's gonna involve a lot of construction and earth disturbance and drainage issues and impervious surfaces and stuff like that, maybe that's where you have your threshold that bumps it up to a special permit. So for business, there's those things to consider, like when I have that little table.
So there's nothing on farm stands or we haven't done anything on farm stands or.
We talked about
it,
Yeah,
and then it got pushed back because we had to do.
They
protocols.
cannabis and.
So that's another thing that we should probably put in the PLCD that we need to review. And maybe see if we can set some standards. Or just definitions of what our farm stands are gonna be.
On the topic of farms, I'm still waiting for the list, the updated list of farms from the Agricultural Commission. I don't have that yet.
Rebecca, I had said, that was close. Close to being completed.
So, I'm still working or waiting to hear back on that farm list. And I still have to finish the farm and business survey and then send that out. We're gonna do more outreach to boards and commissions. I'm gonna listen to those meetings from the Wetlands Commission. I'm gonna reach out again to the Conservation Commission and I don't know if the Zoning Board of Appeals might have anything to say, but I can reach out to them. And I wanted to reach out to the WPCA. So, there was supposed to be other slides in here. Here we go. So, well, we can look at them again. So this is, Amy was very nice to give me a list of businesses And it has a lot more detail, like the actual address and that sort of thing. But this is the kinds of businesses that were listed on the list. So when we think of the permitted uses and special permitted uses in the different zones, if you're thinking about, and this is the location where the businesses are. So if you're thinking in terms of whether you want to make any changes, that's where you could think of, if you're gonna have a site plan review, which uses would be by site plan review? Because if you decided you wanted to do that, and you don't have to come up with a final list now, but you could provide some guidance about it. And then later on, when the regulation is drafted, you would need to have which zones are gonna allow for site plan review, what those uses would be, and if that causes a change to the list of special permitted uses, that would have to be part of your text amendment to make those changes consistent. And then new standards and new submittal requirements in the process for how a site plan review would operate. And then you make whatever changes that results in needing to the special permit section. But that list of businesses gives you an idea what's already here. So right now you have, I didn't include the zoning map, but you have the community district, you have your industrial park district, and you have your lakes district. When the lakes district was created, no changes were made in terms of the list of permitted uses, special permitted uses. I'm not sure if you really want to have all the list of special permitted uses on those lots that are that small. So maybe that's where you want to have a change. Because they have a lot of properties that are tenth of an acre or quarter of an acre, and there's very narrow roads. Maybe that's not the place for you to have a gas station or, some of the uses that are listed as a special permitted use. I always thought it was odd that no changes were made and the lakes districts were invited to the meeting. And then they don't make any changes. And now when something comes up, they complain about it, like about the short-term rental. I think short-term rental, because it's supposed to be essentially the same use, different people, like different characters using or in the structure, but it's still the same use. So, and now it's not really, it's kind of a moot point because now it's at the selectmen, but they had an opportunity to have different uses for the lake districts. And ever since then, they could have submitted their own proposal to do a text change, and they never have. And I've heard they spend a lot of money on legal opinions, so I'm surprised that wasn't their approach. But anyway, this is the opportunity if you wanted to suggest a change. You would make the recommendations and then later on you'd implement them.
Also looking back at the problems with all those uses that are allowed in the Lake District through special permit. One of our particular lake areas, Bungie, with their association, has a long list of deed covenants that sometimes our administrative zoning process runs in conflict with. And it's been the advice of our town attorney to approve these things because I follow our Woodstock zoning regs. But it could be an activity that's prohibited by the Bungie Association.
But that's not our problem.
But I would hope that we could eventually minimize the differences, so we don't have perpetual challenges. I don't know, and some of these, obviously, gas stations in the Lake District, I mean, that we look at those, because some of it's kind of wild, as you said. But our lake districts aren't uniform in opinion. I mean, Bungie did have an opportunity, but it still doesn't stop the conflict that happens between the deed covenants and our zoning.
I mean, I don't really understand what the conflict is. I mean, the people in the lake districts can make much more stringent regulations for their area. And presumably they have some kind of enforcement mechanism. So why do we have to even get involved in this stuff?
Because we issue a permit and then somebody starts digging and pouring a foundation, or and when they haven't. And, I mean, there is. An appeals period, but oftentimes nobody's aware that it's, the permit's been passed.
I
So,
can share a
so
little-
could we make some kind of regulation saying that, that before we approve something, you have to get approval from your Lake District Board?
I could just share a little story about that. Many years ago, someone came in to build, like a shed, not a house. It was not even a seasonal house.
If that's
And-
property, you have to have a house on the property first.
So they came in to build the shed, they got the zoning permit, there was no plumbing involved, so they didn't need to go to the health department. And the lake zoning person, I don't know what their title was, but he
Building
said he was
official.
zoning person, he came in and I found out about it, and he asked me not to approve it. And I said, based on what? If they're in compliance with zoning, I have to approve it. So they appealed me to the ZBA, and the ZBA upheld that I did it right because the zoning permit was in compliance with the zoning regulations. I can't wait until they make a decision, and then what if they decide no? I don't have any authority not to approve something that's in compliance with the regulations because they don't want it. So they may not want sheds before houses, but if that's not how the zoning is written, then the zoning officer can't make that change. Now, they're welcome to submit their own text amendment.
But there's a-
for that
There's a
zone.
basic thing that I'm not understanding, which is that you can approve it, but if they don't approve it, how can they go ahead if they have their own enforcement?
Well, that's up to them. It sounds like their enforcement mechanism may not be working
Well,
because
that's
they,
their problem.
exactly.
I
I
mean,
agree.
that's,
Dwight and Brenda, I think most of their work is through deed restrictions, right?
Yeah, there's deed restrictions and covenants. And then you have, the bylaws, and then you also have the rules and regulations. And there are some that are, tougher than what the town is. You're not supposed to start taking down any trees until you actually have a building. And, there's been issues, there's been conflict there as well. So that's why they spend a lot of money on attorneys. Some of the stuff I think they spend money on. You know, I'm not in agreement, but some of the other things, setbacks, because the lots are so small. I agree with some, and in some cases, they've actually made people move garages and stuff that were not conforming. So, it's a double-edged sword. And the person there has to be on the top of it, and the town has to be on the top of it too. So like driveway permits, that I always found interesting on the way, and even when it came to doing drainage projects and stuff and getting approval from wetlands, it's like, wait a second, it's not an association, it's actually a town within a town. They're formed under section 7-324 of the Connecticut State Statutes. They have the right to form their own fire department, and police department, read the statute, They also have the Flood and Erosion Control Board that's formed under State Statute 25-84. So there's a lot of things that really conflict, and you gotta be really careful. And the biggest problem I think they have is everybody's a volunteer. So you might get somebody that really doesn't have any background in building or in planning, and they're trying to fill a position. That's pretty complex.
So when you say you have to be careful, what do you mean? Who's you?
The people that are on the board of the lake.
So right now, all the lakes in the Lake District, which are not all the lakes in the town, but the 3 lake tax districts that are in the Lake zoning district, they're all one. If you want to, you could change that through the zone change amendment to make them their own zone, like Bungie zone and Widget Wood zone and Quasit Lake zone. And then if they wanted to have a different standards or different uses or whatever, it sounds like a lot of work. And someone would have to do it for it to actually happen, but in any one of them could come in and propose that.
so would there be anything wrong with requiring that they get a approval from their own governance structure before we would consider an application to us?
I don't think the town should get involved in that, but if you wanted to ask the
No.
attorney. he-
I mean,
Well, maybe this is
We have zoning regulations, we have regulations. They adhere to the regulation and pass it. Then, and then the the Bungie Lake District says, oh, no, you can't do that, it's against our, oh, then we can't approve it. Well, yeah, we can, we have to approve it. But, you know, it's like me giving a burning permit, I can give you a burning permit yesterday before it rained, but you can't burn. But you're gonna have to call the dispatch center and find out, high hazard, you can't burn. I can give you a permit, but you can't burn unless it says right on the permit, you gotta go through with the dispatch center to find out what the burning, you know, so it's the same type of thing. I mean, we have regulations, you can prove it. But, you know, now you're gonna go to your lake district and say, well, I'm just gonna put this Taj Mahal up here on this corner. I mean, you know, that does not conform to our regulations here in our district.
But I'm just thinking about the order.
Yeah.
Would we not be able to say, you guys in the Lake District have to get approval from your own board before you present a application to us?
It certainly would save work at the town hall.
That's what
Because
I,
if it didn't
I just-
approve, it wouldn't be something we had to deal with.
This is a great discussion, but we're kind of getting into the weeds here,
okay,
and maybe this is something that we can put in the P O C D
Right.
to clarify and see if, like, rather than, I mean, it's great, but we need, this is something we need to put into the P O C D.
Before a permit can be.
Yeah, just something to look at, so I mean, just so that we can say, we need,
Right.
this is something we need. to
Before you
look
can
at.
submit a permit, you have to have pre-approval,
Yeah.
if you live in a special district.
I'll take issue with that only because it sounds like you're outsourcing your zoning to someone else who doesn't have the authority to make that decision. So that's the same thing as what the lake was asking me before. So if someone came to me and wanted to build structure A, and it meets all your setbacks, the health department approval, all the stuff. But they can't get the zoning permit until someone else says that they're okay. But if they're in compliance with zoning and you don't approve it, you'll be appealed and you'll lose. Because you can only uphold zoning. So if the Lake District, for whatever reason, doesn't approve it. But it's in compliance with zoning and you don't approve it, you're against your own regulation.
Okay, but once again,
Can you put it in?
but this is something that we need to put in the P O C D, so we can work at it at a later time, rather than going through this now. Right?
So
we're
you
trying-
put the recommendation to look into that?
Yes, that's what I'm trying
Yeah,
to say.
but
'cause
can
we
you-
we don't,
can
we
you
don't need to
make
spend
it
time
so
on it.
that
I mean, it's.
If you lived in the Lake District, you live within a Lake District and you want to build something. You're going to come to the zoning board to find out if you could do that, you're gonna. Because you live in a Lake District, you would have to have pre-approval by them. So that they're not coming to us and say, yeah, you meet everything, here's your permit. And no, you can't, and then it goes to them and then it's turned down. Well, what did we waste our time for?
Well, that's what we can,
Yeah.
we can hash
So
this out. at a
putting
later
in
date.
special wording, if it's in a special district. You
Yeah.
have to have approval by that district first before you can apply to the
We
town.
can work on all this at a later date, and figure out what's legal and what we can do and what we can't do, and how we can change it to make it function better for all involved. But that's just a recommendation going to P O C D, so now we can move forward so that we can work on what else needs to go into the P O C D and get this process done.
Makes sense.
That's what I'm saying. It's to look into whether zoning can require a property in a special district to get prior approval from who.
Well, no, just to work with the Lake District to see if we can. Don't even get that specific, we just need to work with the approval process within the Lake Districts to see if they wanna set up. Maybe do a text amendment and separate themselves out. I don't wanna get that specific right now, we just need to figure if we can do something to make it function better. You know, the whole process,
more
so that so it works better for everybody involved, so that the Lake District aren't caught. You know, I mean, just to see if we can make it work smoother.
Well, they are a specific district.
Yes, I know,
so
but
it
they don't
doesn't
have, they
take
don't
much
have any
to write
regulations.
into
Now,
it.
if they wanna start and make text amendments so they can make it a separate district. Then that we can have different zoning rules for, then we can do that, but that's something we can work on at a later date. I'm just trying to get it so that we can work on it.
But they have the same zoning regulations that we have, right? the whole town,
Yes, so they would have to,
so they can't deny.
So they're their own districts, but the
Right.
districts are the exact same, they're carbon copy of each other, but if they wanted to change something only within the Lake District, they can.
So the
But they
difference is,
haven't.
the difference
they
is,
got-
they have.
they do have differences, they're in setbacks. The things that are the same, that seem a bit odd, would be the list of what's a special permitted use. It's the same in the community district as it is in the Lake District, even though many of the Lake District lots are very small. And that's what they seem to be taking issue with, how, for instance, they don't wanna have a business in their zone, except zoning regulations, the way it was approved, which they all participated, they came to the meeting, it was approved that you could do the same uses in that area that you can do in the community district. So if their recommendation is to work with Lake District to hopefully resolve issues on land use and permitting conflicts that may involve zoning
Yeah.
changes or
Yeah.
text amendments.
Yeah, so they need to,
So we can
it
see if
sounds
we
like they need to make their own regulations to change some things that they don't want in their district.
Yeah,
Right,
maybe,
which they haven't
maybe
done
we can help them facilitate. that.
Yeah, that makes sense, yeah.
That's what the goal is.
Right.
So that we get rid of some of this conflict.
So is there any feedback on this stuff here? Shown on the screen?
I think an intermediary step like a site plan review kind of doesn't really. It is what I recommend, and it kind of puts a new zone concept, as unnecessary. If the site plan review accomplishes the same goal,
It's not a new zone now.
It's a new step.
the mixed use step.
We already talked about site plan review, right? We
Yeah.
kind of said that we need to do, we want to look at that. Just to kind of have a step in between. Below special permit. Because then that wouldn't necessarily need the land, it wouldn't be for. we- So the only one that we really. We talked about, we've been working on home occupation, we need to continue to work on that. And the new zone is something that we might want to consider.
And what about the special permit? I think if you do site plan review, you're gonna have to make changes to the special permit.
Well, then we can do that when we form it. If we, in our plans to see if we want to do a site plan review, we can deal with that when we get there.
We should also look at the special permit uses as well. The list of uses.
Yeah,
If
I
they're
mean,
appropriate.
we can do that whole review.
So you wanna consider the new zone?
We'll consider it, yes.
It doesn't have to be limited to the mixed use, there was also discussion of. Allowing businesses on state roads.
Yeah, no,
You wanna consider that too?
yes, so that would be a new zone, and then the mixed use, that was all, that would be a mixed use zone, so that would all be included.
Is there anything else you wanted me to add to the list?
Joe Adaletta couldn't be here tonight, but he did have a question he wanted to get. That if we're discussing housing, he wanted to know if we could find out what are the larger, like, larger than 5 or 6 units are on, have city sewer or water. I don't think anything has city water in town. They might have shared wells.
I can find out for you.
Yeah. And then if there are any on the sewer.
There is an apartment complex on Trip Road that a request came in late today for a zoning compliance letter regarding it. I wasn't aware of it.
Regarding what?
There's apartment complex, I
Yeah.
think,
Yeah,
I
it's
believe
right
that-
on, it's right on the front line.
yeah, I believe that might have sewer, is
I
that?
don't know, I didn't even realize that was in Woodstock until I was riding my bike by it, and I was like, oh. Went by the sign that said Woodstock and it's past it.
Yeah, I was
I
a
mean, it's
little
kind
aware of
of,
it too.
nobody, it's not a road that. Anybody uses going, or not anybody, but many people use.
If you go back through the affordable housing plan, all of our multifamily properties are in there, and it has diagrams on them and details on how many units and that sort of thing.
What does, the elderly housing have for water down there?
I'd have to look.
I don't know, but I don't know why, but I thought, there was a water line that came as high as Amherst College. It can't come up that far, but. I don't know why. I think that-
I know the, well, it's the South Campus now, they have their own water treatment plant, I think they have their own wells. There's a water treatment plant there. So I don't think the water.
I
Or that,
think wetlands had 10 community wells you discussed with the wetlands meeting, was Marla's list 10?
That sounds about right, I'd have to look back at that.
yeah,
I have a map I can show you in just a moment.
are the apartments on 171 behind by Woodstock Veterinary Clinic, are they on the sewer line? You know, about,
I don't believe it runs down 171.
I mean, they're right across the street from Lyman's, so I didn't know.
Yeah, I don't think it runs
Yeah,
down that,
this the sewer line goes up that line.
okay,
I didn't know if they were on it. Random.
I think it goes up as high as Tony's office, Tony's on it. Yeah, Tony's on it.
Going,
But
okay.
he's on the sewer line.
This is a map from our last P O C D. This is all the non-land use districts. It shows your historic district, your Quonset Lake district, the tax districts. It also has your public sewer. I can zoom in on that for you.
the hash marked area is sewer.
Yeah. The purple line.
Yeah, and it continues up to the, academy now.
Right. Email me, Joe's specific question.
Interestingly, the lot that was proposed to be transferred earlier today is depicted correctly on this.
It's not just sewer.
This is
properties.
based on the NECOG GIS, so I don't know, wow, it's different on the town GIS, because you're not using NECOG anymore. So I'm not sure why it was changed. Yeah.
Okay. Where are we at now? Getting late, we still got a few more things to do, so,
Is there anything else you wanted me to, like?
I-
Aside from what's on the list?
no, I think we should probably all look at that, the state plan and see if that gives us any ideas. And just have an idea of where they're headed. Not that really, we do a really good job of considering the northeast corner in their
But they
plans.
can't if we don't tell them what we
But, so, I mean,
have to say.
yeah, I mean, if everybody looks at that and does have comments to send in, certainly make comments. Because otherwise they probably won't hear from this area. So are you done for tonight, Delia? Or do you have anything else you want to cover?
Nope, that's it.
Okay. So now. Do we have any home occupations?
No, there's no occupation.
Budget review bills, I'm new to this, I don't know if we have any bills. Or anything, you and me? I haven't heard anything, nobody corralled me or anything, so. CEO report,
We do have, this item of correspondence, our quarterly newsletter that we get from the Connecticut, Federation of Zoning, Planning and Zoning Agencies. I've digitized this and put this as an attachment on the meeting page on the town website. There's affordable housing conversation, one headline is denial of zone change application based on traffic and parking. So these are recent, court cases that have kind of, that occasionally we face a similar issue that we need to be aware of sometimes. I don't know if we
You said that
maintain
was-
this. Yeah, yeah, I digitized it and included it with the meeting materials on the website.
Those are a great resource.
Permit activity is trimming down a little bit. Should have a list in front of you of the permit activity. Some typical stuff. I did have somebody come in wishing to pull a permit for a tree house. It was a little bit more than a substantial tree house. They produced a site plan. It was pretty cute. It had unicorns on it.
Or
But that was for a Make-A-Wish project, so I think they just wanted to make sure they were all compliant with everything. The rest was pretty typical stuff, a deck, pool. One single family residence that had gone through wetlands last year. Propane tank. Enforcement matters, I've noticed, and Tracy in our office has noticed over this past year that some of the change of businesses that occurred during the transition from Tyke to me didn't pull sign permits. So I'm gonna do an end of year follow-up with 3 businesses that have refaced their signs and request that they pull permits. Or in the case of Dexter, for example, he installed a new sign at the roadway. So it's a matter of just bringing them in and getting that.
he didn't include that in his application?
I'm gonna look into it into more detail, but
We usually, I know. We usually try to make sure that that's included in the permits we make. But I mean, yes,
before I proceed with any of these, I wanted to address it as a cluster, so I wasn't singling out anybody, but if somebody did have that take it button down in their approval, then they're not gonna receive a letter or anything. Treehouse, there's been concern about, the reservation system and the numbers vastly exceeding, 40 or 49. That was discussed in a 2023 preliminary discussion with them. There's no permit issued by this commission. Most of the work is with Department of Agriculture. But in that preliminary discussion, we talked about certain numbers.
Yeah.
And I had a back and forth with the treehouse compliance officer. Yesterday, she was in the office and we discussed the 2023 preliminary discussion and some of the questions that were raised. But I don't think were ever really answered by treehouse.
Yeah.
Because they're looking at increasing the amount of structures. They want to have an event tent, some kind of food, and obviously it appears they're looking to increase their capacity from 49 or 48 without a reservation system. I said, you're gonna have to talk with Department of Agriculture to see what you can or can't do. And then I also felt like another discussion with the Planning and Zoning Commission is warranted about food structures and capacity again.
Is that your recollection, that as long as they kept the numbers under 49 or 50, it did not have to go to that reservation system? Or was that regardless, were the reservations required regardless of numbers?
It didn't get to that in the conversation by the minutes. According to the minutes, it just says, this is what we plan to stay at, and this is related to our occupancy of this, max occupancy of the structure. So,
Yeah, I got, three PDRs that on the 3 pieces of property that I own. And all of them have a limitation of buildable spot.
Only a certain percentage of land you can build on.
So if they exceed that, they've got to go to the Commissioner of Ag to get and sign off. Now, it would be surprising to me. Food and food outside the, so it's all on quality of land, the what they consider to be farmland. And then you have your operating area. And if you exceed that operating area, now you're going into usable agricultural land, and that's a no-no. So they can get approval, but they have to submit a plan to the Commissioner of Agriculture. I'm in the midst of one myself, so there's a process.
And also,
You know,
yeah,
again, looking at permits and so forth, there's something just like getting approval from a lake district before you move forward with a permit to do something to the town, getting approval from the PDR because it's PDR land and the Commissioner of Agriculture or the PDR committee, before you go ahead and give a building permit to put a building up, should be part of the requirements. She should be required.
and that's what I referred them first to the Department of Agriculture to explore those questions.
because the previous owners wanted to put a event
Right,
up there
and
and they
that
were
was,
denied by
it
the
was denied,
Department of Agriculture.
so.
They don't want- they're
Got a
not
track
trying to make
record up there,
Fancy event centers.
right,
So as far as food, is there, I think there's a difference between a food building
isn't
and
that a
food
change of use?
tent. Does a tent require a permit?
I
from
think
the town?
their food idea is not necessarily,
No matter how short term it is, like weekend or, yeah, still,
Even if you're having a wedding and you want an outdoor, those big tents, you need
Yeah.
a building permit. It
Alright.
has to be put up safely, so it doesn't collapse on people.
I think their food service idea, it might be along the lines with the state of Connecticut's craft cafe tolerance for breweries to serve able like what they call like cheese boards and that kind of thing, or like bar appetizer items. But again, I think they've got that PDR.
yeah. it's a
And
way-
what Department of Agriculture is either gonna stamp it out or call it agriculture.
Right.
So that's why they're where they are.
You know, and every one of those pieces of property are different. In the case of, that, the part that I live on, 10 Child Hill Road, there's like a 2.5 acre parcel of land in the corner of that.
It's sectioned out.
buildable.
Yeah.
You know, I could put a house in there, they could put solar, and they could put it on. You know, as long as it complies with the rules of town, I can do whatever I want, but if I go outside that building, now there's another perimeter that goes around what I use as the active part of the farm. You know, farm buildings, silos, all that. So you want to go outside of that, now you're into the agricultural land, so you've got to get approval before you do that. And even when you build, they are supposed to let them know. Even if you're within the window.
Tim, let's just say you wanted to go outside that outer envelope into the PDR land. You'd have to get approval from the state.
Yeah.
And they don't say we supersede or have ultimate authority over the town. You actually we need both approvals.
So when they set the PDR up, they list what's, you know, usable land and, you know, they list it all out. So they only allow you a certain amount for running your operation, like, you know, my pretty spread out, was using pretty much of it. So I've got a field goal that we're looking to put in the corner that's gonna touch that land. So, because I'm changing the use of, one building to help add to the greenery someday and make storage for it. It makes it okay, you know, they're gonna probably approve that. You know, but, you know, I had to come up with a plan of what's gonna happen, what's gonna look, what site changes are gonna happen, blah, blah, blah. You know, I gotta fully explain the whole thing. And it's in review right now. So, you know, I could get time. But I'm just, there are all these wild ideas up there. I like to see where that's sitting on that, what they're allowed to do.
Yeah.
And to me, that's the change of use. We were looking at, you know, processing, you know, a brewery up there, now all of a sudden we're gonna sell food, have a venue up there. That's different. Next thing you know, it's gonna be an inn up there.
That's why I think after they talk with the PDR about their idea, prepare some kind of formal idea of what they do have, that they can come and articulate themselves to this commission to see what, you know, what. Because it's, I don't know if they're just throwing ideas out there. I mean, they probably want to do everything in the world that, you know. But that's in progress. I'm gonna be summarizing our email correspondence and what we talked about in a letter. So they have something to, you know, the town's position on this, talk about with their lawyer and Department of Agriculture. Was there any more questions on and Tucson, I have to reach out to Norm Tebow, Killing the Engineering Associates was preparing a report. And
Basically, prevention of.
I haven't been able to work that into my sequence of things here. We did release one bond for 231 Barlow Cemetery Road. I think it's the last house in the series over there that were put in. Grass looked good, had a mow, driveway looked good as well. Those were the types of bonds that expire on their own, but I did send authorization to finance that they're authorized to expire. Kind of running out of steam. I've been working manically to get this stuff done. I was out of the office for Casio zoning enforcement training from 10/1 to 10/25, and also missed another week for the CACAWIC, which is Connecticut Association of Inland Wetlands Conservation. Veterans Day during that week, and I took 2 vacation days to kind of make it a worthwhile chore, staycation. It went by very, very quick, and I didn't get half my list done. I'd hoped to. So my activity in the office has been condensed with just, I think, 12 days in between our last meeting, our business meeting. And the statutory obligations of the Wetlands Commission have kind of been taking a lot of priority in the office. Wetlands has been meeting 3 hours at a stretch for, I think, the last 6 months. Every time they meet, we have at least 5 to, I think we had maxed at 12 applications in October meeting. So that's a lot of approvals to write and people to chase down for bits and pieces of more information. And on top of that, we've had a large number of inquiries. I think I've repeated myself, the same party line about certain properties around town to one in particular on Loyola Road a dozen times. This is a non-conforming building that straddles the property line. It might even encroach, but they want to tear down this shack of a cottage or build up. But potentially, if they're building up or tearing down, they're going to be their activity is going to be encroaching on the neighbor. So it's been a difficult question that really can only be solved by a survey. And if you're interested in this lakefront property, make your offer contingent on your permit approvals and this results of this survey. But I'd answer that same question to realtors and all sorts of people from everywhere many times, and that's you can add a few more properties that have had that treatment. Keep taking a lot of complaints. Since our last meeting, I've received 9, 7 of which are not actionable. Such as he's shining his floodlight at our house all the time. It's a residential property. Residential properties are exempt from the lighting regs for some interesting quirk of our regs. So there's no recourse there. I do have 2 issues that I'm investigating. One with the health district on 197 near the Thompson Town line. There's a few steers on this property. It's, I think, 1.5 acres. He's encroached on the neighbor who formerly the previous owner allowed that area to be grazed. The new owner doesn't want it to happen. There's barbed wire. There's a lot of problems. I know that's not a zoning issue. It's more of a health department issue and maybe NECOG, animal control. But I did see a shell of a wrecked camper, there's a lot of unregistered vehicles. The health department wants me to go out with them and look at it again. They're kind of wary about going out there. So I'll be getting a better vantage point from the neighbor to observe any potential, but there's ramshackle structures for the animals. I don't know yet if there's any jurisdiction for me with some of these things. I don't know how long these structures have been in place. But going there again in support of the health department and their look at the property. And I'm can't recall which other one I'm looking at right now too. But the majority of our complaints are not actionable. Someone might think, I had somebody come in. What does CEO mean? Zoning enforcement officer. Well, do your job. And that was the lighting reg. I want to help this person, but I don't have a reg to support yelling at somebody about the direction of their residential light. I think that something like that could be explored. I know it's the problem of it being a rural community. In an urban type town, you can kind of develop these kind of nuisance regulations, but otherwise they're not really gonna fly here townwide. And some of these are also, issues that might be addressed in Massachusetts or another town, but not addressed here. So there's a lot of edification and that I have to deliver for people about what our regulations, the scope of our regulations really do cover. As I said, I've been working manically, and it's kind of been consistent that way the last 6 months. I think there was staffing changes that occurred in 2019 that the town, every office in town is still kind of recovering from or finding some equilibrium again. And my office is one of those. It's been a lack of continuity in the zoning officer position. I think since 2019, there's been 5 or 6 different folks. And a lot of this stuff is experiential, something new every day. And over time, you get more comfortable with it. You know some of the answers more quickly, but there's a steep learning curve that lasts years. And when there's not continuity in the position, it's just kind of like you're picking up the pieces every new person. I'm hoping to address some longstanding zoning things that have kind of fallen off. A problem why they fall off is zoning enforcement is discretionary for state statute, whereas permitting has timelines and obligations that you have to keep the permit chain flowing. Enforcement, there isn't necessarily a clock for you that you have to start enforcing. And that means it gets kicked. But I think I am willing to work on some of these long issues. It's about capacity, and I'd like to keep this town out of court. Ultimately, if somebody's not going to do what we tell them to do, it has to go to court. So I'm hoping for compliance without, with niceties, rather than having to cost the town money and devote a lot of labor hours and money towards legal battles. If anybody's got any questions about anything now or when you get home, send me an email and I can research and try to get a reply to you. At least I'll let you know if something going on at your neighbors, if there's any jurisdiction with our regulation. I'm happy to look into anything, take any questions.
I see you got Two Towns Airport here, I guess. It required him to stabilize that slope.
We haven't required him to stabilize the slope. He's working with Killingly Engineering Associates, Norm Tebow, to study. Norm is studying that and offering a report. And following the report, I think we determine the next steps.
Okay. Also heard that's for sale.
There was an auction, but I haven't heard anything if it was sold or.
Anyway. Okay. Thank you, Dan. Any citizen comments? Hearing none.
Move to adjourn.
Yeah.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, it's still holding his chin there, huh? Yeah, he Joe.
Hey, who won the election?
Made it.
Congratulations. Way to go.
Chair and Tim is secretary. It was a desperate battle.
I didn't see any lawn signs, but I guess it was okay within the commission. Have a good night.
Hey, thank you.
Thanks.